to speak is having really tough days, and they're not sure when he comes out. 17 surgeries so far. His intestines are still leaking. He can't hold on to what he is digesting. I just want to tell you all of that because the people of El Paso, and most importantly those who experienced that shooting in that Walmart, have refused to allow that to define them or to define us or to define this country. Their persistence and perseverance, their courage, their tenacity to overcome their injuries and their wounds and their grief, but also if that killer came to us because of what makes us so special. We're an 85% Mexican-American community. We're a city of immigrants and the sons and daughters of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees. Perhaps that also holds an answer going forward to the rest of this country, that we in El Paso do not see our differences as dangerous or disqualifying. We know they're fundamental to our success, to our strength, and yes, to our safety and to our security. El Paso, prior to that shooting, was one of, if not the safest cities in the United States of America. Not despite, but because it is that city of immigrants. It is connected to the rest of the world, joined at the hip with Ciudad Juarez, forming the largest binational community in the Western Hemisphere. Nothing to be defensive about, or apologize for, or wall off, or lock up, or come and shoot people in. Everything to celebrate, to show as an example for the rest of the country. And also a reminder that when we fail to see things clearly, this racism that had long been a part of the country, the fact that we are so violent, we lose 40,000 people to gun violence every year in this country. And in any meaningful way, we have not lifted a finger to that. Not universal background checks, not red flag laws, not an end to the sale of weapons of war, certainly not reclaiming those weapons of war that have already been sold. Sooner or later, those challenges and those problems are going to find every single one of us. And they found us in El Paso on August 3rd, but they taught us to see this, to call it by its right name, and then to describe the action that we will take, and to be bold and fearless in doing so. So when we talk about a mandatory buyback of AR-15s and AK-47s, we don't worry about what the NRA is going to say. We don't worry about what Mitch McConnell or the Republican Party is going to say. We don't worry about what Chuck Schumer or Joe Manchin is going to say. We just worry about the people in our lives and the people in this country and the young people who are this close to either giving up on us altogether or taking the reins for themselves because they can no longer trust us with this decision that we have before us, to decide that we are going to prioritize the lives of our fellow Americans before we prioritize anything else, our re-election, our prospects in the poll, our fate as a candidate for the highest office in the land. And there's a real power to that and a real resonance that I've found, not just among Democrats, which may surprise some folks here, but amongst Republicans as well, owners of AR-15s and AK-47s. Going to a gun show in Little Rock, Arkansas, the day after we proposed a mandatory buyback, which as we're driving into the parking lot of the gun show, I'm thinking, this is the dumbest thing we have done as a campaign. I walk in with some trepidation and anxiety. First guy comes up to me and he recognizes me. He says, "Hey, you're Beto, and I'm really glad that you're here. And I want to be for you. I want to be behind you." And I said, "Well, I've got to tell you honestly why I'm here. I'm really concerned about gun violence in this country. And I think some of what goes on at this gun show is part of the problem. But I came to listen to you. You tell me what we do about 40,000 gun deaths." And this guy says, "I shouldn't be here. If you have a pulse and you're 18 years old, I sell you the gun. There's no background check in Arkansas where we are right now. That's not right. I shouldn't be doing that." Which begs the question, why is he doing that? Nonetheless, there was some common ground. Another guy comes up to me and says, "I have an AR-15, and there's no way that I want to give this up, but I've got 3 kids in school, and they're really anxious when they go to school in the morning. I'm really anxious for them. It's not a matter of if, but when, in their mind, someone's going to walk into their school with a gun and start shooting their fellow students. Each of my kids knows exactly what they're going to do when that moment happens. They're so prepared for it, right?" And so he said, "Buddy, we've got to be able to do something together." And at least we were having a conversation. Another guy says, "I voted for Donald Trump, have an AR-15, would gladly give it up." don't need it for self-defense, do not need it to hunt. There was common ground in Conway, Arkansas, at that gun show. There's common ground across the state of Texas, a proud gun-owning state, but a proud, responsible gun-owning state. More than 50% of our fellow Americans, with no candidate having talked about this before, are for a mandatory buyback. Now listen, that's important when it comes to gun violence. It's important in ensuring that our kids can go to school without fear and focus on learning and getting ahead and just living life as a kid and not having their innocence shattered at such a young age. But I think it's also instructive towards anything else that we want to accomplish. Climate change, you can be forgiven for despairing because everything that we know about climate change in the year 2019, we knew in 1979. And we have done precious little to avert the incoming disaster that we, and even better, our kids, see so clearly. 10 years left to us now to avert the worst of it, to ensure that we don't cook another 1.5 degrees Celsius, after which the droughts and fires in California, the storms and floods in Texas, 58 inches of rain in Harvey alone in the city of Houston, the third 500-year flood in 5 years, all of that will pale in comparison compared to what's coming down the line for us. But when I listen, especially to young people, whether it's the Sunrise Movement or those in senior high schools or colleges who raise their hands at town hall meetings and say this is the #1 priority for them and they are going to make sure that they do the right thing while we still have time, I have hope. I know that we can free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels. We can embrace renewable wind and solar energy technology and the high-wage, high-skilled jobs that come with them. This is another test for us, a moment of truth, and we're going to rise to that challenge, not as Democrats, not as Republicans, not as independents, but as Americans first before we are anything else. People are so ready, so excited to do that work, so certain that they are not going to succumb to that despair that I talked about. They just need leadership that reflects that. So while calling these things out for what they are, drawing the connections as we did with that shooting in El Paso, Texas, but ending on a note of hope and optimism and opportunity and action, that's our chance right now. And that's how we are going to approach every single issue before us, from immigration to healthcare to the environment to anything else that brought you here tonight and has you engaged in this democracy. This campaign will reflect it. And I'll close with this. Matt and Megan both reminded me that many of you helped us in the Senate campaign in Texas. When we started that, we had a polling average of 1% in the state. Nobody knew who I was. I lived in the westernmost county, the only one in the Mountain Time Zone. There were 253 other counties that I had to get out to. So many of you took a chance on me, believed that this was possible, and made it so, got us to every one of those counties, so we had a chance to listen to everyone, talk to everyone. And we always said, no me importa. I could care less who you voted for last time, how big or small your community is, who you pray to, who you love, how many generations you've been here. All that matters is that we have this opportunity together, so let's make the most of it. At the end of the day, though we did not defeat Ted Cruz, we won more votes than any Democrat had in the history of the state. We won independence, importantly, for the first time in decades. 500,000 Republicans, like my mom, decided that they were going to vote for me. Young voters turned out in record numbers because we showed up for young voters in all those communities, up 500% just during early voting over the last midterm election in 2014. We elected 2 new members of Congress, both Democrats replacing Republicans, and 17 African American women elected to judicial positions in Harris County, home to Houston, Texas, the most diverse city in the United States of America, literally changing the face of criminal justice in the process. And the kicker for all of us and what we want to do for this country is that those 38 electoral college votes in Texas have finally been unlocked for the first time since 1976. So I strongly believe that by seeing things clearly, speaking honestly, acting decisively, being big and bold when we talk about the future of this country, and including everyone, and I mean everyone, whether you're in San Quentin prison or whether you're as Republican as they come, in the conversation, in the solution, in the future, there is no stopping us. There's no stopping this campaign and our ability to defeat Donald Trump in November. There is no stopping us in our ability to bring a very divided, very highly polarized country together again in January of 2021. Thank you all for giving us the chance to do this. We're doing it tonight.